Horror movies. They've been around for over a century, scaring the bejesus out of audiences since the days of flickering black and white film. The first horror flick, hard to say for sure. Some claim it was Georges Méliès' Le Manoir du Diable in 1896, a short film only 3 minutes long, but it had all the good stuff: devils, ghosts and spooky special effects that wowed audiences at the time. No matter the starting point, one thing is clear: horror as a genre quickly found its footing. Something about the dark, the unknown, the things that go bump in the night, it resonated with people. Maybe it's the thrill of being scared in a safe environment, like riding a roller coaster. You know you're not really in danger, but your heart still races. Early horror films often drew inspiration from literature. Dracula, Frankenstein, The Phantom of the Opera. These classic stories translated beautifully to the big screen. They gave us iconic monsters and archetypes that still endure today. But more importantly, they understood that true horror is about more than just blood and guts. It's about atmosphere, dread, the slow creeping realization that something is deeply, terribly wrong. And early horror films, even with their technical limitations, excelled at this. The genre evolved rapidly, with filmmakers experimenting with new techniques and storytelling methods. Silent films like Nosferatu and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari introduced audiences to the power of visual storytelling in horror. These films relied heavily on expressionistic set designs, eerie lighting, and exaggerated performances to create a sense of unease and terror. As technology advanced, so did the genre. The advent of sound in cinema brought a new dimension to horror. Suddenly, audiences could hear the creaking doors, the howling winds, and the blood-curdling screams. Films like Frankenstein and Dracula, both released in 1931, became instant classics, cementing the genre's place in cinematic history. The 1950s and 60s saw the rise of sci-fi horror, with films like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, reflecting societal anxieties about the atomic age and the Cold War. These films used horror to explore themes of alienation, paranoia, and the fear of the unknown. By the 1970s and 80s, horror had become a staple of popular culture. Directors like John Carpenter, Wes Craven, and George Romero pushed the boundaries of the genre, introducing audiences to new levels of gore, psychological terror, and social commentary. Films like Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Night of the Living Dead became cultural touchstones, influencing countless filmmakers and spawning numerous sequels and remakes. Today, horror continues to evolve, with filmmakers exploring new subgenres and pushing the boundaries of what the genre can be. From found footage films like The Blair Witch Project to psychological thrillers like Get Out, horror remains a powerful and versatile form of storytelling. Whether it's the thrill of a jump scare, the slow burn of psychological horror, or the visceral impact of body horror, the genre continues to captivate and terrify audiences around the world. And as long as there are things that go bump in the night, horror will remain a vital and enduring part of our cultural landscape. So the next time you find yourself gripping the edge of your seat, heart pounding, remember you're part of a long tradition of horror lovers dating back over a century. And the genre shows no signs of slowing down. From the earliest days of cinema to the latest streaming sensations, horror continues to evolve, adapt, and find new ways to scare us. And that's the true magic of the genre, its ability to tap into our deepest fears and keep us coming back for more. So whether you're a fan of the classics or the latest horror hits, there's always something new to discover in the world of horror. And who knows? The next great horror masterpiece might be just around the corner. The birth of the horror genre was just the beginning. Its evolution over the past century has been nothing short of remarkable, and its future looks just as promising. Here's to another century of chills, thrills, and unforgettable scares. So dim the lights, grab some popcorn, and get ready for a journey through the dark and twisted world of horror. Because the genre is alive and well, and it's here to stay. And remember, the next time you hear something go bump in the night, it might just be the start of your own horror story. Back in the early days, horror wasn't about buckets of blood or computer-generated monsters. They didn't have the technology for that. Instead, they relied on something far more powerful: atmosphere. Filmmakers of that era had to be incredibly creative. They used lighting, shadows, and sound to build tension and fear. The creak of a door, the flicker of a candle, the rustle of leaves, these were their tools. Think about F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu from 1922. A silent film, sure, but that eerie, shadowy world, the way the film captures Dracula's unsettling movements, it gets under your skin. That's atmosphere at work. The shadows in Nosferatu are almost like characters themselves, creeping and crawling, making you feel like something is always lurking just out of sight. The film's use of light and dark creates a sense of unease that stays with you long after the credits roll. It's about creating a feeling of unease, of dread, of something being just out of reach. It's the subtle things that make your heart race, the flicker of a candle in a dark room, the eerie hallway with shadows that seem to move on their own. It's the shadows in the corner of the room, the creaking door, the wind whistling through the trees. These elements work together to create a world where anything can happen, and your mind fills in the blanks with your deepest fears. It's about what you see, what you don't see, and what you think you see. It's the unknown that makes your imagination run wild. The power of suggestion can be far more terrifying than anything shown on screen. And let me tell you, the imagination is a powerful tool when it comes to horror. When a film leaves room for your mind to wander, it taps into your personal fears, making the experience uniquely terrifying for each viewer. It's one thing to see a monster on screen. It's another thing entirely to have your mind conjuring up something far more terrifying in the darkness. The power of atmosphere in horror is that it engages your imagination, making the fear feel real and personal. As horror evolved, filmmakers started realizing that the scariest monsters weren't always supernatural. Sometimes the most terrifying things are human. That's where psychological horror comes in. Movies like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, 1960, messed with your mind. No ghosts, no goblins, just a charming but deeply disturbed man named Norman Bates. Hitchcock understood that true horror is about getting under your skin, making you question reality, sanity itself. He used suspense, suggestion, and good old-fashioned human darkness to create some of the most effective horror films of all time. Psychological horror reminds us that everyone has a dark side. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the line between good and evil is often blurry, and sometimes the monsters we fear most are already inside us. Fast forward to the late 70s and 80s, and horror took a turn for the visceral. This was a time when the genre began to focus more on the physical and the immediate, rather than the unseen and the psychological. The slasher film emerged as a dominant force, characterized by its graphic depictions of violence and relentless killers. This was the era of the slasher film, where blood flowed freely and body counts were high. These movies were not just about scaring you, they were about shocking you, making you squirm in your seat with their explicit content. Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street became household names. These films were not just popular, they were cultural phenomena that left a lasting impact on the genre. A Nightmare on Elm Street. These films gave us iconic killers like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger. These characters became the stuff of nightmares, their images etched into the minds of audiences everywhere. The focus shifted from atmosphere and suspense to graphic violence and gore. Special effects artists pushed the boundaries of what could be shown on screen, creating increasingly realistic and gruesome scenes. But don't get me wrong, some of these films were effective in their own right. They knew how to tap into our most primal fears and keep us on the edge of our seats. They tapped into primal fears, the fear of being hunted, the fear of pain, the fear of death. These are universal fears that resonate with everyone, making the horror all the more real. But something was lost along the way: the subtlety, the psychological depth, the slow build-up of tension. These elements were often sacrificed for the sake of immediate shock value. The art of scaring you without showing you everything, it faded into the background. The slasher era was a double-edged sword, bringing both innovation and a shift away from the more nuanced storytelling of earlier horror films. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say, the cat jumping out from behind the curtain. Jump scares. They're everywhere in modern horror, and frankly, I'm tired of them. A sudden loud noise, a quick cut to something startling. It's the cinematic equivalent of someone yelling boo. Sure, it might make you jump in your seat, but that's not real fear. It's a cheap trick, a shortcut that lazy filmmakers use because they don't know how to scare you any other way. A true horror film doesn't rely on jump scares. It builds dread, it creates atmosphere, it gets inside your head and stays there long after the credits roll. So how do we move beyond the jump scare and back to real horror? First, we need to understand what makes something truly terrifying. It's not about the gore or the special effects, though those can have their place. It's about tapping into our deepest fears, the things that keep us up at night. It's about the unknown, the unseen, the things that go bump in the night, and the unsettling feeling that something is watching you. It's about the fear of losing your mind, your loved ones, your very humanity. True terror is about confronting the darkness within ourselves and the world around us. One of the most effective techniques in horror is the art of suggestion. It's about what you don't see rather than what you do. Remember that scene in Jaws where you never actually see the shark for most of the movie? You just see the fins circling, hear John Williams' iconic score, and your imagination does the rest. That's the power of leaving things to the imagination. Our minds are capable of conjuring up far more terrifying images than any filmmaker could ever show us. It's about creating a sense of dread, of anticipation, of knowing that something terrible is lurking just out of sight. Another lost art in modern horror is the slow burn. Many films today are all about instant gratification, bombarding you with scares every few minutes. But true terror takes its time. It simmers, it builds, it draws you in slowly until you're completely engrossed in the nightmare. Think about The Silence of the Lambs. It's a masterclass in suspense. The pacing is deliberate, the dialogue is sharp, and the performances are chillingly real. By the time Hannibal Lecter escapes, you're already on the edge of your seat, completely invested in the story. So where does horror go from here? How do we move beyond cheap jump scares and rediscover the power of true terror? It starts with filmmakers who aren't afraid to take risks, to explore new territory, to challenge audiences. We need stories that are more than just gore-fests. We need characters we care about, situations that feel real, and scares that stay with us long after the lights come up. We need to return to the basics: atmosphere, suspense, psychological depth, and the courage to confront the darkness within ourselves and the world around us. That's how we'll make horror truly terrifying again.